According to the latest report from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, 2024's federal budget deficit has now hit $1.8 trillion. That's with a T. It's the highest level in 3 years. We're getting this news as economists try to parse the presidential candidates' plans to see how much they would add or maybe hopefully subtract at some point. But I don't think this is part of it, the deficit and debt. Joining us right now, House Budget Committee Chairman Jodey Arrington. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew.
So $6 billion a day is the cost.
Unsustainable. At some point, we're going to run out of other people's money, and the people we're borrowing from, some of our foreign creditors like Japan and China, by the way, will stop loaning us money to pay for an ever-growing government where we have almost $2 trillion in an annual deficit. If you look over 10 years, we're going to add over $20 trillion to the national debt. We're paying over 50 cents on every dollar just to service the debt. That's more than we spend on all of national defense. That cost is almost $1 trillion. That's more than we're spending on Medicare now. So the wheels are coming off the wagon, and we have to have a plan to reduce our spending, stabilize the debt by just growing faster than we're spending, and getting back to economic growth.
This would have been a good year to do it because revenue was up 11%.
Yeah, we've seen record revenue, by the way, ever since.
Corporate revenue up 26%, but spending was up 11%.
Great. There's a great chart on the front of the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, look, if we grow 1%.
We've just been outspending every single year.
Yeah, we have. But look, the foundation's always going to be growth. We had over 3% GDP prior to COVID. And if we grow 1% over what CBO projects, the 10-year annual GDP average, which is 2%, paltry 2%, then we will reduce the deficit by $3 trillion. We'll bring the debt.
But let's talk about how do we grow and are we actually going to have a real conversation about cutting? Because I was going to say, in terms of cutting spending, neither candidate on the presidential end of things and very few in the Senate and Congress seem to be talking about cutting anything ever.
Yeah, well, I think there are two myths on each side of the equation politically. One party thinks that you can tax your way out of this deficit hole, and you can't. You'll run out of other people's money, as Margaret Thatcher says, and you'll destroy the economy, quite frankly. That this is the worst time to consider adding taxes on our job creators or our families suffering with the worst and most regressive tax of inflation. At the same time, there's a myth on the Republican side that we can just grow out of this $2 trillion, soon to double in the next 10 years, et cetera, about $130 trillion over the next 30 years. It won't happen. We won't get there if we don't rein in spending.
You can look at,
so we have to combine the cuts.
Right. But nobody wants to have the cut conversation.
No, I do.
If I said to you, where do you cut?
Oh, listen, let's start with unspent billions of dollars of COVID. Let's start with tens of billions in funding for illegal immigrants.
Where is that money, by the way? So you read these headlines and say there's $200 billion or all this money from COVID that's been unspent. Where is that money?
It's like the monies we're spending on illegal immigrants. It's housing, it's health care, it's welfare.
But it's spent or it's unspent? People say this is like the COVID money is unspent.
It's appropriated but not spent. And listen, it's just billions, but there are tens of billions in spending. In fact, it's $9,000 per illegal immigrant. In fact, CBO just did a report, $16 billion on Medicaid spending. This was just last week for people here illegally. And I could go through a list.
I should say, by the way, I also saw some new data which surprised me, and I don't know what you do about it. The cost of removing illegal aliens from this country could be astronomical as well, which we have not figured out.
They put that in those deficit plans. Why Trump's is worse, but we're not talking. But we're not talking about cutting right now. On the Trump side, no tax on Social Security, no tax on tips, no SALT cap anymore. I mean, it's crazy. But on the other side, we're not talking about cutting. Do you know what this new entitlement for home health care would cost if you put it under Medicare? It's $288,000 a year for people to be taken. You add to that $25,000 for down payment on houses, $3,600 child tax credit, $6,000 baby bonus, universal pre-K, and paid family leave. That's not cutting spending. Those are layering all this new spending. I don't know how much that is that I just mentioned.
that's complete new spending. But then there's the other argument on the other side.
I said that, but
well, no, not just that. You get tariffs, and then what does that do to the economy, and how much can you collect in taxes? At some point,
we'll ask Ro Khanna this: if we had 26% higher corporate revenues, why do we need to screw with that and go up to 28% on the corporate tax rate?
Well, I think that Trump has a list of things that I would say are a starting point for negotiations.
No, I'm not saying he wants to go down to 15.
Well, that's right.
But she wants to go up to 28.
So do you think that going to 15 is the right answer? Given what you just laid out
on just domestic.
These are a list of proposals for consideration. What we have to do is keep taxes low, keep our businesses competitive. How that shakes out in terms of any one provision is
I'm asking very specifically, because all these are going to be specific. So if I said to you 15%, would you vote in favor of 15%?
I'm more interested in locking in permanent tax breaks for small businesses that will expire next year, like the 20% deduction, the 199A for small businesses, where Kamala Harris and her tax proposal would allow that to expire. And then when she says she's not going to tax anybody making less than $400,000, that's just simply not true. There's 1.5 million businesses that gross, as you know, well over $400,000, but they don't take home $400,000.
If we go to 28, you add in state, that'd be some of the highest in the world.
But exactly. I guess what I'm saying is this.
Yeah.
And can you have both ideas in your head, and can you say them publicly? That the Harris plan, as it relates to taxing small businesses, may not be good, and at the same time, 15% may be too low. Can you say that aloud?
Here's what I was...
Just for companies that manufacture
I'm just saying that...
Let me tell you what I can say out loud. We need the lowest rates to have our job creators have the most competitive posture vis-a-vis their competitors.
So would you go to zero?
And we need, by the way, we need the lowest tax rates on our families whose wages have been burned through by inflation.
Would you only do it for companies that do it here? That's like weird corporatism.
Here's the point.
Isn't that industrial policy?
Here's the point. You can keep taxes low, but you have to reduce spending commensurately. You have to bring down the structural imbalance in our mandatory spending, which is 75% of the budget. You can't just defer the tax, which is what increased deficits are, a deferred tax on our children.
So my question to you, therefore, is your candidate is former President Trump.
Yes.
Do you believe that there are plans that he has articulated that would bring down, not just grow the economy, but bring down those costs and the spending piece? Are you aware of those? And what are those?
Well, I can tell you that he's talked about this efficiency commission with Elon Musk, and I can assure you that starting with $236 billion in waste and fraud in healthcare and welfare entitlements, there is a
lot of stuff in there. I hope so.
Waste and so this guy's run a business. He understands that you've got to clean up your balance sheet. He knows how much waste is in the federal government. He knows the bloat that was carried over in the bureaucracy from COVID. He knows all the waste in welfare. He knows what incentivizing work will do to save money and get people out of the welfare trap.